new growth constellation of emerging economies implies a new economic policy orientation and a new foreign policy orientation. Does Salman Khurshid, India's External Affairs Minister, agree with my assumption? Well, I'm going to put that question directly to him. We're talking here at GrowthNet of a group of new emerging economies, countries ranging from Vietnam to South Africa to Indonesia. Now, to what extent do these countries or GrowthNet connect with India's foreign policy or dovetail India's foreign policy? I mean, how much of your mind space is occupied with these countries?
I think this is a terrific question, because we within the country often ask ourselves, are we as the Ministry of External Affairs going to have something to do 3 years or 5 years or 10 years down the road, or will the trade minister and economic ministers take over everything? And our strong opinion and response is that no, there is something that will remain, and there is something that will grow, and there is something that is very, very significantly different from what trade ministers and finance ministers can do, because articulation of your economic policy in a context can only be done by the foreign ministry. So, in answer to your question, economics is going to provide a lot of interface and bonding, but that bonding will have to be packaged in terms of foreign policy. So foreign policy will often follow economics, but sometimes economics will have to follow foreign policy. And I think that this is a new paradigm that's emerging, which means your foreign policy is to be far more sophisticated, but with a lot of elements that are traditional and conventional and time tested. And your economic policy, particularly global economic policy, will have to be suitably informed by foreign policy. And that's why. So you can't do it in a vacuum. You can't just simply say, and let's look at the sums, and these sums look good and those sums don't look so good. That's not how it will happen.
But to what extent is, your time and efforts at engaging with India's partners focused on countries like this? I mean, is there a tendency to still devote a lot of time and energy to the US, to the European Union, to the BRICS nations, China, Russia, Brazil? I mean, do they still take up a major share of foreign policy efforts still?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the answer is that if you want to be a leader amongst the nations of the world, then you are not going to be successful simply by being a follower. You have to create your own space. You have to create your own profile. You have to be available to people. You have to play the leadership role. Of course, today the world is not going to have a single leader or 2 leaders or 3 leaders. Everybody can claim leadership, but not everybody has the time and energy and resources to be leaders. So there will be leaders that will emerge in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, in Europe. There are leaders who will emerge, and there will be leaders on the global plane. And I hope that India will be a leader on a global plane, and we will emerge, which means we have to interact with everybody and not just with a small group of countries.
For starters, that means you're going to have to ramp up the Foreign Office staff numbers.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Are you working on that?
We are working on that. We have a 10-year plan in which, if you look at the probationers who've come in this year, they're twice the number who came in last year. Now we're getting a greater range of people. Our training processes are changing. The numbers are being increased, and we are looking at what more changes we can make from within. It is my intention that with the Prime Minister's approval, I will soon have a committee of experienced people, not just from the Foreign Service, but from other areas of policy management, who would contribute to what India's Foreign Office should look like five years down the road. So we would have a visionary document that will take us forward.
You talked about India having the need or feeling the need to play a leadership role, and to an extent the DPA, the Development Partnership Administration, is a reflection of that. I mean, you could argue that India has always actively assisted other developing nations, but it's really got much sharper focus now, in your own words. So is there a visionary role or play or document or blueprint on that front as well?
Yeah, we've worked on internal papers. There are papers that have actually reflected this paradigm shift or the new focus. But we have three parallel lines running. One is the political element in foreign policy. Another one is the development element in foreign policy, and the third is the cultural element in foreign policy that sometimes people call soft diplomacy and the soft power image of India, etc. And these three have to work in parallel, sometimes converge, sometimes contribute to each other, and then make an overall impact. And I think that in each of these we have specific advantages over many of the countries that would compete for the same space as we do.
Okay, so you've got all those cylinders firing, but you know, businessmen are often the first ambassadors in a sense between countries. They seek the opportunity, they arrive there, they set up businesses. How much is Indian business giving you feedback of some of these, what we refer to as the growth net countries? You know, is the engagement vibrant and active, and hence coming back to you as feedback of nations where we must engage?
It's good, but I think it's still something that we can ramp up further. I think the attitude towards business changed dramatically in the last 20 years. We had a arm's length sort of talk to me from a distance approach.
But not anymore.
But that's not anymore. But rest of our institutions haven't picked it up. Government has picked it up, but the rest of our institutions haven't picked it up. So institutions like the judiciary, for instance, they look surprised sometimes. Why is the business house working so closely with government? Is there something wrong? And I think that we need more institutions in the country to understand what governance is in modern times. It's not like the past, it's changing. And in order to understand that, you have to understand economic landscapes. You can't, in isolation, decide this is good or this is not good. We are not talking about what is good, we are talking about what is essential. And if modern economics requires these relationships to be much closer and much stronger, then we need to understand modern economics.
One last question. Do you wear your economic hat quite often, have to wear an economic hat quite often now in your visits and discussions?
Well, it's a lot of that. A lot of that is economics, but we work closely together with my colleague, Mr. Anand Sharma, who's the Commerce Minister, and obviously periodically touch base with the Finance Minister, because at the end of the day, they do the trade and economic policy, and we translate that or interpret that to the world in a political context. And I think it works well. Sometimes we do it together, and we work very closely, and I think that's the way we will succeed.
Well, Mr. Khurshid, thanks very much for your time. Good talking to you.
Thank you.